Hey, Dr. Karen Can here. Welcome to another edition of the Spiritual Medicine Digest. Throughout my lifetime, I've had these interesting health conditions that boil down to one of the Chinese medicine imbalances called excess damp. Now, these are called pernicious influences, and you may have heard of them if you've gone to a traditional Chinese medicine doctor or acupuncturist. They talk about excess wind, excess damp, excess cold, excess dry, excess heat, excess summer heat. Those are kind of the classic excesses, if you will, that humans can succumb to. And even very early on, I had all sorts of interesting bubbly rashes, which is excess damp. I had menstrual issues connected to excess damp. I've had tumors, benign, that were contributed to this excess dampness that I tend to carry on. My family on dad's side had diabetes, which is a type of dampness as well, that extra sugar. So, there are other things too, zits, pimples, nasal congestion, swelling. These are all symptoms of excess damp. So as I went along my journey in Topican healing and energy healing, I was surprised to find out that I could not necessarily get away from dampness as a susceptibility or vulnerability in my body. And I thought, well, that's a little strange. I wonder why that is. Well, I found out that there is something that I call the Crystalline Body Blueprint. It's sort of like the blueprint of who you are when you're embodied, as in a physical form, in all your lifetimes. So there's a thread that goes through, that there's similarities, even if you're an alien or a human or whatever. In other timelines, there's a thread of who you are in this crystalline body blueprint, which I also call the crystalline body matrix. And one of the vulnerabilities that I found out that was written into the crystalline body blueprint for me is this susceptibility or vulnerability to dampness. So I thought, well, that's easy. I'll just delete it, right? Well, no, not so much. It was one of those things that for the highest good, that I had to keep, if you will. Now you might wonder, well, why is it for the highest good? Because you're not perfectly healthy, then blah, 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 right? I think this whole thing about being perfectly physically perfect or healthy is a little bit of a egoic desire. I'm not saying that it isn't wonderful. I'm not saying you cannot manifest that. Absolutely you can, if it's for your highest and greatest good, if that is what your soul and your higher self has decided is for your highest and greatest good. Here's the thing. If we were all born 100% perfect physically in every way possible, there would be no reason to grow, right? There would be no reason to seek, to learn, to explore, possibilities and healing. You'd be like, well, there's nothing to heal. Our life is perfect, and you wouldn't really appreciate life. Like sometimes as humans, especially, we need a contrast in order to be fully compassionate. Maybe we need to experience physical pain in order to appreciate warmth. Maybe we need to experience cold, you know what I mean? So sometimes we need to have a contrast, the yin and the yang, to have an experience of something. In other words, it's hard to experience light if light is all you know. So sometimes you have to experience darkness in order to experience light. Same thing with sadness and joy, the seemingly opposing emotions. So I thought it was rather curious that there were certain vulnerabilities written into my crystalline body blueprint that I could erase and delete and dissolve, and no big deal. Whereas excess damp was not one of them. So what happens is that when there is a rainstorm out there, I may feel in my body that excess dampness. It might show up as stuffiness. It might show up as a little bit of swelling or even achiness in my knees. And so I can do topic healing. I can release all those different layers of damp, and there could be multiple layers because I heal very quickly. So there could be, multiple layers from multiple timelines that can heal simultaneously. So I can heal all at once, and then, the symptoms go away. But you see that there's still that susceptibility to having that. So other damp symptoms for me personally might occur if I decide I'm going to eat a lot of fried foods, suddenly. So in the past, I really loved potato chips. Now I'm kind of, sometimes I have a craving for them. Oftentimes it's because I have not eaten enough fat, especially saturated fat. So I may have that craving. So that is not necessarily a healthy craving to have. And so my desire for fried foods is much, much less than it was before. But if I eat too much of that kind of thing, or sweets is another thing that causes damp. In Chinese medicine, they talk about that. Then I may have more postnasal drip or whatever. Thankfully, a lot of the deep dampness that I had growing up that I did not realize that I had is completely gone. So, for example, the terrible skin I used to have a face full, even as an adult in my 40s, a face full of zits. Now, they were tiny, so they weren't like necessarily the red hot ones. That would be excess heat, by the way. They were flesh colored, but there were hundreds on my face. Now, if you look back at pictures, you'd be like, I can't really tell. Well, I wore a lot of makeup back then. Yes, I kept Maybelline and Revlon in business. And I just never thought that would get any better. And I'd had all sorts of bumps, my arms and legs, and all sorts of sinus infections. Yeah, well, with changes in diet, better quality of diet, using LifeWave phototherapy patches, working on the mindset and the emotions, the spirituality, all these things have helped immensely. So it's very rare that I have those kinds of damp symptoms, but occasionally I will have postnasal drip. Occasionally I might have a knee ache, when it's really storming out there. So the other night I was lying on my Ascension 3 Energy-Infused Yoga Mat, and sometimes I forget to use it as an Ascension 3 tool, which is basically a healing tool, a conduit direct to source where we can just have some wishes, like a magic wand, except it's a mat. So the other day I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just using it as a yoga mat. I should use it like a med bed, So I was lying on it. And I was saying, okay, heal this, heal that, heal this, heal that. And I'm yawning, as the energy is moving. And then I decided I was going to do some divine muscle testing and just check in. How many layers of damp do I have in all timelines combined? The answer was 27. So, and this isn't necessarily a huge number because we are talking all timelines, right? And I knew it was a vulnerability in my Crystalline Body Blueprint. So, I just manually, usually get rid of it. But I took a moment of pause in the stillness, thinking about the dampness. And then I thought, the idea just popped up, Crystalline Body Blueprint. I haven't really thought about that in years. So I thought, okay, well, do I still have that vulnerability, in the Crystalline Body Blueprint to have a tendency towards dampness? The answer was yes. And that, of course, follows me from lifetime to lifetime. It wasn't that it was negative or low vibrational, anything like that, but for some reason it was there for my learning, my evolution, to teach me acceptance. Who knows? There might be a slew of other things, but for whatever reason, it was for my highest and greatest good, so I just accepted it. But the other night, I decided to ask, is that still necessary? And shockingly, the answer was no. I was like, whoa, what? No. And I thought, you mean I don't need this vulnerability anymore? Like I'm done with whatever I'm working with? The answer was yes. So I tested and retested it a number of times. The answer was still yes. So I deleted it. And now the funny thing is the next day it was rather cold out. And instead of having damp symptoms, actually I had cold symptoms, excess cold, but it was not related necessarily to the Crystalline Body Blueprint. I do not have a written in vulnerability in the blueprint for excess cold, it just happened to literally be physically cold outside. So my body was just adjusting to the whoa, 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 whoa. It's suddenly really cold out there. It's 47 degrees Fahrenheit, And so there were some little niggly things, going in the joints, but not anything serious. Of course, I could just erase it, right? With Topican Healing Directive, I just delete, dissolve, and uncreate the excess cold, and then Bob's your uncle. Well, but the Crystalline Body Blueprint is so interesting. So I thought I'd ask further questions, and I asked, can anybody remove any vulnerability from the Crystalline Body Blueprint? The answer was yes. At this point in our ascension, the answer is yes. Like, we don't need, if you will, to have those vulnerabilities in any reality, in any lifetime any longer. So that is great news for a lot of people who have not been allowed to delete or dissolve that particular vulnerability or vulnerabilities from their Crystalline Body Blueprint. Now, of course, our ego is the one that wants all these things gone, right? So we have to honor and respect that sometimes, if all of our lives were perfect in always shape, size, form, whatever, it'd be pretty darn boring, right? Like, why would we incarnate into another lifetime or timeline just to have different colored wings or hair or whatever? Like, boring, right? So for our evolution, we need to have different experiences and different timelines, different missions, things like that, so we can grow, so we can evolve. But for whatever reason right now, I'm getting the message is that we don't need those vulnerabilities. Now, does it mean that you necessarily can get rid of all instances of pernicious influences? No, because some of these pernicious influences, like I mentioned before, are not written in to your Crystalline Body Blueprint. So how do you figure out what it is? Now, in Topican Level 1 training, in the guides video training, we actually talk about the Crystalline Body Blueprint, also called the Crystalline Body Matrix, and how you can muscle test what vulnerability might be there. Now, they're usually, what's relevant anyways, usually there's not like 50,000 or something like that. Usually there's like a key one or two, something like that, at least that we found. And once you figure out what that susceptibility is, and one of the hints is you could, for example, take your Topican Healing Guides if you are in the Level 1 program, and you could take a look, for example, in Guide 1, right? And just see, is there any vulnerability in my Crystalline Body Blueprint for any of these energies in Guide 1, and see what you get. And so once you figure out what that susceptibility is, then at that point, then you can do a directive to delete, dissolve, and uncreate that susceptibility or vulnerability from your Crystalline Body Blueprint immediately. So it's not like you're vulnerable, to that particular thing, whatever that thing is. For me, it's dampness. For you, who knows? It might be low boundaries. It could be susceptibility to entities. Like, it's different people have different things that they have, created for their blueprint. And now we can uncreate it from our blueprint. So we don't have to necessarily keep working with those energies. And if this is something that you want, what you want to do is have a good way of figuring out a yes or no, whether that be with divine muscle testing, with, working with a pendulum. Get into stillness. Stillness through observing internal movement is the way I do it, because I'm very busybody and I tend to be like, whoo, lots of creativity up in my head. So for me, just to pay attention to the body and feel the energy flow is the way I get into stillness. So when you can go there and you can do your muscle testing or your pendulum, and you'll be much more accurate. And then you can test how many vulnerabilities do I have written into my Crystalline Body Blueprint. Less than 10, less than 5, and then keep counting down until you get a yes. So that could be 2, that could be 1, that could be 3, who knows, right? And then if you are in Topican Level 1, you could, make it quicker for you and just say, are any of these vulnerabilities in Topican Guide 1, right? Or even Guide 2 or 3. You could kind of like figure out what it is through some of the words there that can point you in the right direction. And then once you have that, then you do the directive to delete, dissolve, and uncreate that vulnerability. So because I can't possibly muscle test for everyone that's watching this video, okay, so you have to do your own work. What I can do is I can do step 1 and 3, which is get you into the stillness, right? Then you do the testing, and then I'll do the activation with you and for you here. So if you're ready, let's practice going into the stillness together. So go ahead and rub your hands really, really fast. This is just to get energy moving. So if you don't need to do this to get energy moving, or at least notice movement in your body, then don't bother doing it. You can close your eyes if it's easier for you, and then focus on the inside of your body and feel any movement or energy traveling in your hands, in your arms, or anywhere else in the body. And then just follow the flow of that. Continue following the flow. And as you tell your mind to follow the flow, what happens is your mind stops chattering at you. It's a way to go to stillness by focusing on the body. You can open your eyes, see if you still can feel the energy flow, and if not, you can close your eyes again or rub your hands again. And then imagine that if you did know what a vulnerability might be written into your Crystalline Body Blueprint, you can bring it to your consciousness right now. Now, this may or may not be true if you're not muscle testing, but can't hurt to just bring one up right now. So I want you to be thinking about that. We're going to go ahead and do a Topican healing directive to delete it. And just notice what happens in your body when we do that. Here we go. I now command that this vulnerability in your Crystalline Body Blueprint be deleted, dissolved, and uncreated with love in the highest and best way, all directions of time, with speed, ease, and grace. Thank you. All right, and just feel and notice what's happening in your body. Maybe you don't notice anything, maybe you do. I'd love to hear whether you have an experience that you would like to share. Go ahead and put it down in the comments below this video. And actually, while you're at it, if you're new to my channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell, so every time I do a new video, you'll be notified. Yeah, so that is it. This is really, really good news for those of us who egoically don't really want to suffer from pain or dysfunction or anything like that. Yeah, there may be other things happening in the world that are not written into your Crystalline Body Blueprint that you can address, sometimes all at once, permanently. But it was one of those things that even with, Ascension 3 before, where I can command, if allowed, 24/7, that the dampness always be removed, it would still come up because I have that vulnerability. So it'll be really interesting to see. For example, today I tested there was no layers of dampness anywhere in my entire Infiniverse lives. And it'll be just interesting to see how that plays out over time. So I wanted to give you that news as soon as possible because it's super interesting. And those that practice Topican healing will be very enthused to hear about this shift. So a couple of announcements for today. On Monday's Light Warrior radio show, I have the pleasure of airing a podcast episode that I did with Monique Rose. We're going to be talking about the secret to being happy and being happier. Now, this isn't what you might think it is. Happiness, where does it really come from? What's the difference between happiness and actually pleasure? And how do you access, there we go, foundational sustainable happiness, especially as a sensitive soul where you're feeling other people's stuff sometimes, right? And what are the factors that contribute to your happiness, and how can you learn to take control of it, and why happiness is actually considered a habit? So if happiness has been on your mind, and honestly, we're doing everything we're doing just to be happy, okay? So it is key. Go ahead and join the show Monday at 12 noon to listen to the pre-recorded show with Monique. I think you really, really enjoy it. So I'll put the link near this video. So a couple of announcements. So some new stuff. I have a new Healthy Habits, Healthy Life video talking about the cleaning solutions that I use from Pure Biotics. They are probiotic cleaners. So the main ingredient, if you will, are probiotics, beneficial bacteria that can eat through biofilm that is caused by dead bugs and dead, bacteria from maybe previous cleaning. And it's one of the few things besides, enzymes and probiotics that can actually work through the biofilm, and that is why some of the other cleaners in the end don't actually work as well, because they might kill the bacteria on the countertop or whatever, but they don't prevent the new bacteria from seeding and growing it, because the biofilm actually feeds the new bacteria. Sounds yummy. So I'll put that link if you're interested in checking out the product that I use called Pure Biotics. They have a cleaner and a spray and some other things. And in fact, as of this recording, I had decided I was going to start my hydroponic garden all over again. It had been overgrown with algae. Taking care of it was a lot harder than I thought it was, given the instructions. Also, I'm not known for my green thumb. So I decided to start all over again. And the products from Pure Biotics helped me a lot. Because the first time I tried it, I was just using dish soap, and it was so hard to get that green algae stuff off. And it's like, we took us 6 hours. Now, it still took us a lot of time this time. Well, actually, this time I did it by myself. So, but I thought, well, I'm going to try the Pure Biotics. And I used the Pure Biotics, and amazingly, it was so much more efficient at taking off the algae. And now I know the probiotics are there as well, so it'll actually prevent potential algae growth. So I'm excited to start my garden all over again. You'll probably see, some pictures on Facebook and my light medicine community as the new plants grow. So just a reminder, there are some amazing telesummits going on right now that are launching or have launched. Number one, the UWealth Revolution. Number two, the Trauma Relief Summit with Deanna Hansen. I'm actually on Wednesday. They're going to actually air that interview that I did with Deanna. Then we have the Alchemy of Ascension a couple of days later, where we talk about ascension and connection to source and really cool things that I think you would really love. So make sure you sign up for those telesummits as soon as possible so you get the email and the specific link to watch all the interviews, including my own. And thank you so much for joining me. I am so happy you're part of my tribe. And if you have not already joined my light medicine community on Circle, I'll put the link near this video as well, so you can join us in that private, uncensored community. Until next time, bye for now.